Hey everyone, let me throw a few things at you real quick. Hahn, Greedo. Hamilton, Burr. ATF, David Koresh. Mr. Chaffin, Miss Chaffin, who didn't like my bleach blonde hair in college. Well, I guess that's a different kind of shots fired. Hey everyone, I'm Mr. Chaffin, and in today's lesson, we are going to add another famous example to that list of who shot first, so let's get started. You know, up to this point in the Revolutionary era, it's been all about protests and boycotts and a lot of talking and not a lot of doing, all right? So we're kind of to the point now where both sides are getting ready to do some damage, all right? So let's get to the main event. So the battles of Lexington and Concord are two related but separate skirmishes that started the Revolutionary War. And by this point, the colonists had done everything to sort of extend a hand of peace and reconciliation and, hey, let's work this out to King George III, to which he basically gives them the silent treatment. He doesn't really respond at all to any of their requests except to say that they have been kind of disobedient and, basically nothing but trouble for him. And so they're done with the, talking it out option. They're kind of on to plan B, which is the my aim is better than your aim option. And it's about to be on. All right, so it all happened in April of 1775 when a loyalist spy, so a loyalist is someone who had stayed loyal to the crown or loyal to Great Britain, they told General Thomas Gage, who was the British commander of all troops in North America, that the militia in Concord, which was a small town outside of Boston, had a large arsenal of weapons and ammunition. And so Gage took this information, and under the cover of night, he took 700 redcoats and marched through the countryside to go seize the weapons. It's about a 20-mile march. But little did he know that the Patriots had spies of their own, men like Paul Revere and William Dawes, who were sort of watching the movement of these troops leaving Boston. And they started riding out to the countryside as well to alarm and notify the militia in the area so that they could respond to the plans of the British. All right, so as the sun rose on April 19th, 1775, John Parker, who was a militia leader in the area, had about 77 men that had gathered with him on this big open field at Lexington. And these guys that had joined him were called Minutemen because they were essentially ready at a moment's notice to respond to a call to war. And they met about 250 British redcoats who had gone ahead of the other troops as kind of like a scout unit. And so these two groups meet each other on this field. And it's here that John Parker is allegedly known to have said, stand your ground, don't fire unless fired upon. But, if they mean to have a war, let it begin here. All right, so when it was all over, about 8 Patriots had died. Many more were injured compared to just one redcoat that was injured. And so this was not looking good for the colonists, the Patriots, the Americans. They were clearly outnumbered and outgunned and outtrained. And so if this is the way this war was going to go, it was not going to last long. So we kind of get a sense of their fight really early on. And the question has to be asked, like, who shot first? And that was sort of the point of the lead-in at the beginning of the lesson. Everyone says Hahn shot first or, Burr shot first or whatever the case may be. But no one really knows. It's still a mystery to this day. But to be honest, it doesn't matter anymore. The fighting had begun. Lexington and Concord really were the first battles of the Revolution. That's why they're significant. And so now there's going to be like actual bullets flying around and actual bloodshed in order to decide the fate of the Americans with the British. So after Lexington, the British continued their march to Concord because remember, they still had unfinished business. The whole point of them making this march was to go seize these weapons. But because of the advance warning of guys like Paul Revere and William Dawes, most of the weapons had already been moved. They'd already been stashed somewhere else or destroyed if they couldn't be moved. And so the British are pretty ticked off by this point. So they had just marched overnight 20 miles, just gotten a little skirmish 5 miles ago. And so they actually start setting fire to the things that they did find, weapons, farm tools, things like that. And so the plumes of smoke that are rising from Concord kind of send the signal to the area militiamen that they're setting Concord on fire. They're actually burning the place to the ground. And so by this point, about 400 militiamen had gathered to meet the British at what's called the North Bridge. And so the North Bridge is this really critical juncture and strategic place to have control of right outside of Concord. And so these 400 militiamen really make a beeline for the North Bridge. And this is kind of where we get the famous quote or saying about these battles of Lexington and Concord, the shot heard round the world. All right, so the Patriots meet the British Redcoats at the North Bridge. They basically start fighting back. They start pushing them back. And so the British retreat. They had come to do a certain thing. They had taken care of that certain thing, destroying weapons, or at least what they could find. And now they start making their 18-mile retreat back to Boston. And so here's what gets me, though. Just some numbers here. 77 was the first number of Minutemen that made this response. Then it grew to 400. And now about 4,000 Minutemen had heard the call and made their way to the area to fight the British, okay? So 77, 400, 4,000. So now the Patriots clearly have the numbers advantage. And so they start using guerrilla tactics all the way back basically to Boston. They're popping out from behind fences and rocks and buildings and everything else that could give them cover. So they shoot, cover, and then they move and follow the British all the way back to Boston. And so in the end, it's about 250 British soldiers that had been killed or wounded compared to about 90 Americans. And so, Lexington and Concord started off really bad for the colonists, but it actually ended up really well. Because whether they wanted to or not, the Americans are now in, kind of this scrappy fight with the world's leading military power, which is England. And it proved like a big moment, though, because these colonists weren't just all talk, all right? So we know a lot of people that can talk a game. They can talk real big, but when it actually comes down to it, they back away from the action. And so the colonists are not that way. They talk the talk and they walk the walk. So they're basically willing to fight and die now for their independence and their rights. All right, well, shots fired, literally. And the story only gets more intense from here, but it all comes down to this. Can you explain the issues surrounding the battles of Lexington and Concord? In other words, what were the British going to look for? What did the Patriots do in response? Like how many Patriots ended up responding to this call and defending Lexington and Concord? And kind of more importantly, why is it important to the American Revolution as a whole? Okay, so Lexington and Concord is just one little part of this entire war. Why is Lexington and Concord significant? I'll give you a hint. It's significant because of where it belongs on the timeline. Okay, so think about that. Where does it belong on the timeline of the entire war? All right, there you have it. You've officially been schooled by Mr. Chaffin. Work hard, be nice. That's what it's all about. And if this video really did help you out in understanding this topic or for a school lesson or anything, hit that like button. Let me know that you appreciated it. If you liked this video and want more like it, hit that subscribe button. I try to put out videos pretty regularly for U.S. history curriculum, so make sure you subscribe to my channel. And until next time, y'all take it easy. Peace.